What's up guys, Andre here, and today we'll be looking at how to install and how to use Tailwind CSS. Tailwind CSS is a utility-first CSS framework for rapid UI development. Created by Adam Wathan and friends, I've been very intrigued by this utility-first way of writing CSS. I was inspired by Adam's streams where he goes over the workflow and builds out an entire UI using only the utility classes provided by the framework. Definitely give those a watch if you're interested. I'll put the links in the description below. Now here's what we'll be building. A remake of Twitter. Now if you look at this, you might think that this is just a Twitter page, but this is actually all done in Tailwind CSS using the default styles, the default colors. I only added a few customizations for like sizing and height and stuff like that, but most of all it's just the default styles, and it looks pretty close to the real thing. Here's the real thing. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So we'll go ahead and build this whole page out using Tailwind. Now I'm going to be working with Laravel and Laravel Mix to work with Tailwind because I find it's just the fastest for configuration purposes. But I have a video on using Laravel Mix outside of Laravel if you want to work on just a standalone project. And you can also just use other ways. Check the documentation. You can use Gulp or Webpack. So I have a fresh Laravel installation here. The only thing I have is the images for all the Twitter stuff in here, like my avatar and all that stuff. So first thing we want to do is just npm install. Okay, next we want to install Tailwind. So if we go to the documentation, we can just do installation here, and right here npm install Tailwind CSS. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, that's done. Now let's create a Tailwind config file. Let's name it the default of tailwind.js. So let's grab this and do tailwind.js. Okay. Now the next thing is to grab this. This is the default CSS you need to make Tailwind work. It's literally only 2 lines. It's just a whole bunch of comments explaining what they're for. Just copy that. Now, I'm a heavy Sass user, but from what I've seen and what I'm doing, a preprocessor is not really necessary. The majority of the work is going to be done adding utility classes in our HTML and modifying some of the default Tailwind values and maybe extracting out a few components. So in my opinion, you don't really need a preprocessor, but if you want to use it, you can go ahead and do that. Let's make a new folder here called CSS, actually no, new folder, CSS, and let's make a new file here called main.css. And let's paste in our code here and save that. Now back in our documentation, like I said, I'm going to be using Laravel Mix, and all we have to do is this right here. We have to add this. Let's go to our Webpack. So add that right here. Let's change it to let for ES6. And then all we have to do is this. So main.css, and our path is just going to be tailwind.js. Tailwind, there we go. Save that. Now if you run npm run dev, that should compile it down. Okay, so that worked. So here's our app here. And let me just show you the basics of it. Welcome.blade.php. And let me just show you an example. If I just put class equals bg black, refresh here, Now we have to add our CSS here. So let's just add that up here. Link, where is it? CSS main.css. And if you refresh, there we go, it's black. I want to use a watcher, and I want to make sure that this updates every time I make a change. So let's go ahead and use browser sync. So to do that, just go back to our Webpack file, and let's just add .browsersync and add the URL, which is Tailwind examples.test. Do that, run an npm run watch, and it's going to install the dependencies we need. And once that's done, just do it again. And now we have our watcher running. And once we make a change, let's go back here, change it to blue, save. There you go, awesome. I just want to show you quickly how to extract components. So say we have this BG blue text white. Say this occurs several times within our markup. It's probably a good idea to extract that. So what we would do is give it a class name. We'll name it component. Let me just copy that for a sec. Copy that. Component. And in our CSS, it says right here, here's where you would add your custom component classes. So right here, component, we'll just do apply, put those classes in there, and then make sure we have the dots. And save that. And it still works. So we're going to be starting from scratch, so I erased everything that we didn't need here. Keep in mind that since I've already built this before, I've already gone through the process and made the decisions of how to lay things out, where things go. So it's not 100% representation of starting from scratch. It would have been nice to actually start from scratch like Adam does in his streams, but I'm not a CSS wizard like he is. And if I had gone that route, then this video would literally be over 5 hours of just awkward pauses, going to the documentation, and all that good stuff when you're working with CSS. So just keep that in mind. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is take a look at Twitter here, the real Twitter. Let's define some global styles here. So one thing I see is the background is just light gray. And also let's take a look at the font. I have a Chrome extension here called What Font, and it's using Helvetica New, Helvetica Arial, Sans Serif. So that's the font stack there. So let me show you how to do those two things in Tailwind. Back to our code. So for the background, the class name is called BG Gray Light. And if you take a look at the documentation, you'll see a whole bunch of default colors, which are pretty damn good and pretty accurate, if you ask me. Especially the grays. I'm going to be using a lot of the grays here. And also, if you go into our code and look at the tailwind.js file, look for the colors right here. They're also defined in here. And this is fully customizable. If there's a color that's not available, just go ahead and add it in here, and then you can reference that in your classes. But like I said, the colors are pretty good and pretty accurate in my opinion. So for the font stack, again, if you look at the documentation is excellent as well. We're going to use Font Sans, so let's go ahead and do that. Again, let's look for the documentation here. Here's the stack, and I'm just going to leave it as default. You can go ahead and erase this if you want. Like if you erase that, save it, we have our watcher running, so that will pick up on that. But I'm just going to leave it default. Font sans. If we go here, you'll see that there's a gray background. Awesome. All right, back to Twitter. So the next thing I want to work on is this top nav over here. As we can see, it's white, and there's a container that encompasses the entire site. So let's go ahead and work on that. So we're going to need a container that sets the whole background of that top header to white, so BG white. And within that, we need a container. And Tailwind actually has a container class, but it doesn't center it by default. So to center it, we got to do MX auto, which is pretty much margin auto. We're going to use Flexbox to lay it out horizontally. And we're going to do item center to, again, use Flexbox to center it vertically. And let's just see how that looks. Let's put some text in here. And so that's pretty good. Let's give it some padding as well on the top and bottom. So to do that, py4, 4. Okay, do that, save it, and there's some padding. Looks good to me. So for padding, if you search for padding or any spacing, you would just specify padding or margin, and here are the sizes here. If you look in the config, look for spacing or padding. There you go. You see all the digits here, and again, this is customizable, so if there's something missing, just go ahead and add it. We'll be doing that later on. So for this nav, I sort of see it as 3 different groups. We have something here on the left, we have something here in the center, and we have something here on the right. So I'm going to use widths to do this. So I'm going to have 3 divs, one with width 2/5. Did I do 2/5? Yes, 2/5, 1/5, and 2/5 here. Again, documentation, you go to width. I just picked one that was already defined here, so I went with 2/5, 1/5, and 2/5, and that worked out pretty well in my case. So let's go ahead and do that. So in here, so this one is going to be this one. So let's go ahead and use a nav for this. We don't have to, but let's use a nav. And the class is going to be width 2/5. And then for the second one, width 1/5, 1/5. And for the third one, same thing, 2/5 though. Let's just see how this looks. Alright, that looks good to me. So if you look at the icons here, you'll see that they're all outlined icons. But in my case, I'm just going to use Font Awesome. I'm just going to use the CDN. Some of them have outlines and some of them don't. But it has all the icons we need. So I'm just going to go with the solid icons for Font Awesome. Definitely feel free to use SVGs. That's what Adam does in his streams. Okay, let's work on those icons. Or this nav over here. This nav. Okay, so it's in this section. Let's go ahead and make an anchor tag, and within there let's just add Font Awesome. So first one is FA Home, and I also want to make it a bit larger, so that's the class for that. It's called Home. Right, see how that looks. Okay. If you look at the Twitter page, you'll see that the majority of the links are this teal color. So I'm going to go ahead and define a global style in my main.css. We don't need this. And we're going to do text decoration none. Again, you can do this using utilities, but I'm going to do it in here. And I want to apply a text teal to all of them. So they're all teal by default. Now that should be teal. There it is. We're going to overwrite that with our utilities because we don't want it to be teal. But for the rest of the links, and it's good for that. Let's just see how it looks with a few links. Save that. Okay. And I'm just going to give it some classes here. So let's make the text smaller. Let's make a margin right. Let's make it semi-bold. Give it a padding. And let's see how that looks. Let's give it a text gray darker. Change the color. Okay, and let's see how that looks with a few links. And it's looking good. And I'm just going to go ahead and change these to their appropriate names and the appropriate icons. Give that a save and see how that looks. And it's looking pretty good. If we take a look at Twitter, we'll see that there's some hover actions going on here. We have the text changing to teal, and there's also a border bottom. So let's handle the text first. So all we have to do is do hover text teal and see if that works. Yep, works for that one. Let's go ahead and add it to the rest of them. Cool. Now for the border bottom. So what we have to do here is set the border first before hover. We have to set it to a transparent color. So border B is for border bottom. 2 is for 2 pixels. We want it to be a solid one. And at first we want it to be transparent, but let's just see how that looks with an actual color. Alright. So that's not lining up because of this text, so let's remove that. Let's just make it 1, same with this one. And let's change the padding on that. So right here, change it to 4. And that lines up. Okay, so to make it on hover, all we have to do is change this to transparent. And on hover here, we do border teal. And there you go. Let's go ahead and add that to the rest of them. Cool. See if that works. And it looks good. Now you can see a lot of repetition going on here, so this is a good case for extracting to a component. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's copy that. Let's grab all of them. Let's rename it to top nav item. And in our CSS, let's go top nav item. And we're going to do apply everything there. Not the hover states though. So for text teal and border teal, let's not forget our dots here. And let's define a hover state here. Hover, we're going to apply the text teal and the border teal. And that should still work after it compiles. There it is. Let's just refresh it to make sure. There you go. Now let's work on the Twitter icon right here in the middle. That should be simple enough. So right here, let's just do, it's a link. And within the link, let's just do IFA font Twitter. Let's make it large as well. And that should be it actually. See how that looks. We should center it. Actually, we should make it blue. It's text. Teal, I think. Blue. Okay. And we should center it. So right here we can center it. Text center. And there you go. That's centered. Cool. Okay, now let's work on this section. So if we look here, we're going to use Flexbox again, and we're going to align it to the right. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so let's use Flexbox, and to align it to the right, we can use Justify End. And we're going to have 3 items in here, 1 for each one of these. So the search, we're not going to name them, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so the first one is going to be the search. Let's just see how it looks. This is the avatar, and this is, what was this again? The button. See how that looks. Search avatar button. Awesome. Okay. Let's start with the button, since that's easiest. Okay. Class equals BG teal. And on hover, we want BG teal dark. We want white text. We want medium font. We want padding that way and padding that way. And we want rounded full. See how that looks. I did not name it. Tweet. See how that looks. That looks good to me. As you can see, that sort of pushed down the whole container. So I think we can fix this by doing PB6 here. Okay, that's good. What's next? The avatar. Okay, it's an anchor tag. It's an image. And the source is image/avatar.jpg. It's called avatar. And the class is, I have a height of 8, width of 8, and rounded full as well. Rounded full. And that should change it to a circle, and that's looking good to me. Let's add some margin on it, like on the surrounding div. So MR4. It looks good. Okay, now let's work on this search. Input text class equals, so it's gray, lighter. We want a height of 8. Padding of these things. We want smaller text. We want a width of 48. And rounded full. Let's also give it a placeholder. Search Twitter. See how that looks. And that worked. Let's give it a margin as well. Okay. I'm not sure why that background is not showing. BG gray lighter, because I can't spell, that's why. There we go. And now let's work on this icon here. We're going to use absolute positioning for this. Adam did this in one of his streams, so I just kind of copied him. So we need to make this div relative because we're going to absolutely position the text box. Actually, no, we're not going to absolutely position the text box. We're going to make a new container and we're going to absolutely position that. And this container is going to contain the icon. Let's do that first, actually. I.fa, fa search, and let's make it text gray. Okay, and now for the classes, this has to be absolutely positioned. We also want to use flexbox to center it. We want to absolutely position it, and we want to give it pin R is pin right, which is basically right 0. Pin Y is top 0. See how that looks? Yep, that worked. Let's just give it a small margin here. So margin right of 3 should do it. And that looks pretty good to me. Okay. So there you have it. We have our header, and it looks pretty good to me. The padding is a bit more. I just feel like the one on Twitter is a bit cramped here, so I'm using a bit more padding there. And yeah, it looks good. Let's move on. So the next thing we're going to work on is this hero image here. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, let me just put a comment here that ends the container, and this is the new one here. So for this, I'm going to use a CSS background, and that requires to use CSS. There's no utility for that. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, let's call it hero, and let's go to our CSS. And the background is going to be URL / image / tailwind _ bg.jpg. Okay. I don't think anything's going to show yet because we did not define a height. Yeah, we didn't define a height, so let's go ahead and do that. Now if we look for height here, where's height? Not that. Height. Okay. So you'll see the biggest is 64. So let's try 64. H64. See how that looks. And yeah, let's give it a BG cover. So it accompanies the whole container. There you go. But 64 is not big enough. So I already did the work and I did the math. I'm going to do H112, and in our Tailwind config, I'm going to specify a new one, 112, and again, the math, if you do the math, it's 28 revs. Save that. That should compile. There it is. And now it's a good height. Alright, now let's work on this section over here. It's very similar to this up here, like we already did, so let's go ahead and do that. So we need a white background, and it also has a shadow. So let's do that. And then let's do .container. MX auto, flex, and item center. Let's just see how this looks. Okay. And just like before, we're going to have 3 sections here. But we're going to have a different proportion this time. Let's do 1/4, 1/2, and 1/4. So let's do that. All right, so 1/4. This one's 1/2, and this one's 1/4. Let's just see how that looks. Okay. So let's start with the right side since it's the easiest. All right. We're going to use Flexbox. We're going to justify it to the end, and we're going to center it. We have 2 items here, so let's make 2 divs. Let's put a button in the first one, just like before. And we can make a component because the buttons pretty much look the same, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to do it BG teal dark, text white, font medium, PY2, PX4, rounded full. And it's called following. And for what's next? This is just an icon. It's a link with an icon i.fa.fa ellipse ELLIPSIS and FA large. See how that looks. Okay, it's not showing. It's actually -V. See if that works. There you go. Let's add a class here. Text gray dark. Okay, and this is at a margin right on this first div. Let's do 6. There you go. We'll add some padding later on in the component here. So let's go ahead and work on this section. There's 5 elements here, so let's go ahead and make 5 items. We'll use a UL here. li times 5 a. Okay. And within each anchor tag, let's go ahead and put 2 spans in there. That's to accommodate one's going to be the header and one's going to be the actual number. So let's go ahead and fill that out. Tweets 60. Okay, let's see how that looks. Okay, we got some work to do. Let's remove the bullet items from the UL. So to do that, we can do list reset. We're also going to flex it so it goes, yep, okay. We can also change these to divs since they're block level. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and fill these out. So text center, PY3, PX4, border B2, border solid, border teal. Let's see how that looks. All right. Just the first one should have border teal because that's the active one, so we don't need these ones. Okay. Now let's work on these ones, on the anchor tags. Class equals text gray, darker, hover, no underline. See how that looks? Okay, looking good. And now let's work on these headings. So text smaller, font bold, tracking tight for the letter spacing, and margin bottom, small margin. See how that looks. Okay, looks good. And now let's work on the number. So text large, tracking tight, font bold, text teal, and PB4. Let me just remove this. I think that's adding extra padding. Let's see if that helps. If I remove it, it doesn't. Why does it look so weird? Okay, we don't need this padding here. And there you go. That looks better. Okay, now let's work on this image over here. This image right here. So we're going to absolutely position the image. So let's make this relative. And let's go ahead and add the image here. So slash image, that's tailwind logo.jpg, logo. And then we can do rounded full. So it's a circle, height 48, width 48, and absolute. Pin L, pin top. See how that looks. Okay. Let's just give it some negative margin to push it up. And to do that, you do negative MT 24. That did nothing. Oh, okay. That's because we have to add, we have to add 24 here. So 24 is 6 rems. Let's add it up here too, just in case we need it. Okay, that's done. See if that worked. And there you go. There's our logo, and everything's looking good. Let's make a few minor adjustments. These should be gray. Only the active one should be teal. So that's easy enough. That one should be text teal. But these 4 should be hover text teal. And this should also, when you hover, should also underline. So I think I already added part of that in the li. I did. I just have to add the hover state. The hover state right here. So hover border teal. There you go, looks good. Alright, now let's work on these 3 sections. So it's going to be similar to this. We're going to have 1/4, 1/2, 1/4. And yeah, let's go ahead and work on that. So I believe this ends the container. It does. Let's put a comment there. And down here is where the next section starts. So let's make a new container. MX Auto, Flex. Okay. Let's just see how that looks. Okay. Now let's go ahead and split those sections up. So div class equals 1/4. This one's a half. This one's a quarter. Okay. See how that looks. Okay, looks good. Let's just give it some breathing room here. So on this first one, let's give it padding right for, I think 6 actually. Okay. And let's give it a margin, the whole thing. So this margin top, 3. Alright. And let's get working on this side. Alright. Let's give it a margin top of 8 and a margin bottom of 4. Okay. And let's just see what's here. We have this. And let's make it an H1. H1 Tailwind CSS. Actually, it should be a link. And let's make another div with the Twitter handle. See how that looks. Okay, let's just fix that. Class equals text black, hover underline. Actually, I don't think we need the hover underline. Okay. And is that not teal? Okay. So let's just style that accordingly. So actually should be a link as well. Text gray darker, and that should be good. It looks good to me. Alright, now let's work on this section over here. Let's just make another div here. Let's give it some margin on the bottom. And just paste it in to save some time. See if that worked. My watcher is not running. Sorry, I put the div in the wrong place. This should be within here. So like that. There you go. Let's put a MB4 on this. Okay. The text looks a little big to me, so let's make that smaller. So for the entire container, let's make it text small. Okay, that looks good. And letting normal. Does that change anything? Okay, awesome. And if you look at Twitter, most of the links are underlined on hover. So let's go ahead and change our global style here. Hover TDU, text decoration underline. And now all of this stuff should be underlined. Awesome. We can remove this up here. So for the hover on here, let's just do TD none. Okay, cool. Now let's work on the link and the date. Get rid of the sidebar, I don't need that. Alright, so let's just make container, let's make an icon, FA, FA link, FA large, text gray darker, and let's give it a bit of a margin, and let's make a link that goes to tailwindcss.com. See how that looks. Looks good to me. Let's do something similar for the next one, which is a calendar. So we're changing this to calendar, and this is going to be joined August 2017. See how that looks? Looking good, looking good. What's next? This button over here. Just going to start pasting stuff in because it's getting pretty long. So it's just a button. We've done that before already. See how that looks. Okay. We put a margin down here on this one. Maybe a 4. Okay. What's next? 27 followers, you know. And just add another div. Let's do that. See how that looks. Okay. And let's make a section for all the images. MB4 link, and it's going to go to image slash follower 01.jpg avatar, and the class is going to be rounded full h12 width 12. See how that looks? Okay, and I'm going to add the rest behind the scenes. There's a total of 10. Okay, see how that looks, and it's looking pretty good. Next is the photos and videos, and pretty much the same thing. Let's just paste those in. So photos and videos, let's just do this. See how that looks. All right, and again, another section for the images. And it's going to be very similar to what we just did. It's going to be a link, image slash photo 1.jpg photo, and class is going to be height of 20, width of 20, margin, and the margin. And see how that looks. All right, and let me just add 5 of them because there's 5 of them. So it's not working because I have to add these values inside our config. So let's look for height. Okay. Yes. So 20 is going to be 5 rems. And for width, where's width? Again, 20 is going to be 5 rems. Cool, save that. And if you go back, there we go, looking good. Now let's do this section. Okay. So right here, let's just do a BG white and a margin. And we can start working on this. So we're going to have a padding of 3. The text is a bit larger. Font is bold. And there's a bottom border here of 1 pixel. So border B, border solid, border gray light. And within here, just see, that's where the links are going to go, but let's just see how it looks. Alright, it looks good. Let's just paste the links in there, since I feel like this video is going way over time. Okay, nothing we haven't seen already. See how that looks. Alright, it's looking pretty good. Now let's get to the tweet section over here. Now again, for time I'm just going to do one, then I'll just recreate a few other of them. So what's going to happen here is, again, Flexbox. And it's just two sections. We have this section over here, and we have this over here. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's start a new div. We're gonna flex it. There's a border, border solid, border gray light. And like I said, this is going to be one section and the other is going to be another section. So we'll give those widths. So let's see, class equals, let's do 1/8. 1/8 and the other one will be 7/8. I'm not sure if that's, if I have to add that. I think I do have to add it myself. Let's align it to the right, give it some padding. And then the other one would be 7/8 with 7/8. Let's just double check if there actually exists a width like that. And there does not. It does not exist. So let's go ahead and create those values. I'm just going to paste it in here to save time. So 1/8 is 12.5%, 7/8 is 87.5%. And well, there's nothing there yet, so let's continue working on that. So if you look at Twitter, the first thing is this thumbtack. So let's go ahead and add that. I'm going to paste it in. And let's see how that looks. I think that's okay. Okay. And the next thing is the avatar. I'm going to paste that in as well. Let's not use asset here. Alright, see if that works. And yeah, that's looking like it works. And now let's work on the content over here. So the first thing I see is this line with the tailwind and the date. So let's go ahead and grab that. Actually, no, the first thing is this pinned tweet thing. So within our 7/8, let's do that. See how that looks. Alright, we have to add some paddings. Let's go ahead and do this. Padding 3. And I'm not sure why I have that, but okay, that looks good. Now we can work on, okay, there's actually two sections here. There's this one section over here, and there's this chevron over here. So I'm going to use Flexbox and do justified content space between. So I'm going to paste it in to save time, but here's the flex container, and I'm doing justify between so that these two items are like one's to the left and one's to the right. So again, nothing crazy going on here, stuff we've already done. Let's see if that works. And yep, it looks good. Okay, now let's do the content. Again, nothing too crazy here. Just copy that. All right, I'm gonna make another div here. And I'm gonna paste this code in, and this is just all the content. Again, I don't want to use asset here. And yeah, let's see how this looks. It's looking good, okay. And the last part is just this section over here with all the icons and the retweets and the comments. And again, I know I'm doing a lot of pasting here, but it's getting really repetitive and getting really long. So that should take care of that section. There you go. Looks good. I even sort of followed the color scheme, like the hover is blue for that, green, red, and teal. If you look at Twitter, blue, green, red, and teal. Cool, and I am just going to repeat this for a few more other tweets so I can scroll down. But there's nothing too different about the other tweets. The icon is different here, same thing here. This one might be a bit different. As you can see, there's a sort of a card component here. I'll explain that after it's in my code. Alright, I've added a few more tweets and here's how it's looking. It's looking pretty good. And the only difference is this. Again, not too difficult. I'm just using Flexbox, giving this a width of 1/4, giving this a width of 3/4, and that's how it ends up. And yeah, now let's just work on this right sidebar and we should be done. So again, I'm just gonna paste section by section to save some time. So let's go ahead and do that. So over here, let's give this some padding on the left to give it some breathing room. Okay. And let's go ahead and start adding stuff. So PG white, padding 3, and margin bottom 3. And the first thing is just who to follow, refresh, and view all. So let me just grab that and paste that in. Alright, see how that looks. Alright, it's looking good. Next is this component over here. Again, this is a bit tricky as well. It's pretty much the same as the tweet section here. We have this, we can use Flexbox, we have this, and we have this section which is justify content space between. And yeah, I'm gonna paste that in. Again, I do not want to use asset. Okay, let's see how that looks. And it looks pretty good. Okay. So again, just if you don't understand it, just I'll make the code available for sure. So I am just going to put the other two in there. And that's how it looks with the other two. Next is this find people you know section. Okay, just going to paste that in. See how that looks. And it looks pretty good. And just this one last section, connect other address books. Okay. And that section's done. This is pretty straightforward, so I am just going to paste. Actually, these last two are pretty straightforward. So let me just paste it in. Okay. Oops, that is not in the right section. Should be within this div. Okay. Some trends there. And the last section is just a bunch of links. So let me paste that in. And that's how it looks. So here is the finished product. It looks pretty damn close to Twitter if you ask me. There's Twitter. So I didn't want to ignore responsiveness because that's probably of interest to some of you, how to do responsive stuff within Tailwind. The actual Twitter site is actually not really fully responsive, so I can't follow a guideline there. But what we'll do is we'll just do very basic stacking. So as you can see, just 3 columns here. We just want to stack after a certain breakpoint. Same with this. We'll just stack this underneath this, and then stack that, and we'll stack this as well. So if you look at the documentation for responsive, they take a mobile first approach, and here are the breakpoints over here. So it shouldn't be too difficult. So let's quickly go over that, and we should be done. So over here is where we specify our flex container, and we do 1/4, 1/2, 1/4. So right here. So this is 1/4 for this section right here. We have 1/4, 1/2, and 1/4. But since we're doing a mobile first approach, we have to define the mobile styles first. So for flex, it's still flex, but the original direction is going to be flex column. And then once we hit our large breakpoint, I'm just going to do one breakpoint, and it's going to be the large one. We're going to change the direction to flex row. And we have to change the widths for each of them. Again, we have to specify the mobile one first. So in our case, W-full is just width 100%. And then once we hit this large one, it goes to width 1/4. So we got to do the same for the other two, I mean. So width full, and once it's large, go there. And then where's the next one? Right here. Width full, large, width 1/4. Okay, let's just fix this. Okay, and let's see if that stacks when we do our mobile. So right there. Awesome. So it does stack. See, that wasn't too difficult at all. So we got to do the same thing for each of our flex containers, and every time we specify a width. So we got to do the same thing here. Let me just make this full width, and we got to do the same thing up here. So not too difficult. Let's go ahead and fix this one where it has like tweets and stuff. All right, let's find that. No, not that. This one. Okay, so right here. So flex call and large flex row. And then here, same thing with full, large like that. Same here with full, large like that. And right here with full, large like that. Okay, see if that works. Let's just use the DevTools. Let's put it to the side. And let's turn on mobile. Cool, did that work? Yeah, it did work. We just gotta do some more work. Let's shrink this. Let's move this to the left. And yeah, that should work. By shrink, I mean shrink it, yes, but we also should not make it absolute anymore. Let's go ahead and do that. So let's find where the logo is. So Tailwind logo, okay. So here, let's make it relative on large. And for the image, let's make it absolute only on large screens. And same with all these absolute properties, because that's only going to happen when it's a large screen. And we don't need this one. Do we need this one? No, that's also on large screen. See how that looks. Okay, that looks better. And that looks fine to me. Let's just left align this button over here. Alright, so where's that button? It's down here somewhere. And justify and only happens on large screens. And by default, it should justify to the left. That looks pretty good. Let's also give it some margin. So right here, when it's mobile, we'll give it some margin, but when it's big screen, no margin. So that should give it a margin. There you go, that looks good. And I'm okay with that section. Let's just fix this and that should be it. So same deal. Flex call, large flex row, width full, large width 2/5, width full, large width 1/5, and same with this. Okay, see how that looks. Okay, it's looking good. Let's just same thing. Let's just take out the justification to the right on that section. So on large, justify and that should do it. Okay, and let's just give this some margin on the top and the bottom. So right here, let's just give it a margin of 4 when it's mobile, and when it's not mobile, no margin. There you go. So that's looking pretty good to me. Responsively, it's looking pretty good. Let's just double check and see if it still looks the same for our desktop version. And it does. So there you have it, guys. We've managed to build out this entire Twitter UI using Tailwind CSS and its utility classes. This is definitely a huge change in the way I write CSS, and I'm really enjoying the process. We can probably do more work and extract all the repetitive code to components, but you guys can go ahead and do that on your own. So a few things I wish Tailwind had, which I think will be supported in the future based on what I've been reading. One, I hope it supports CSS Grid, because CSS Grid is all the hotness right now. And two, I hope it supports CSS transitions, because a lot of the UIs out there use CSS transitions to make their UIs look polished. The nice thing with Tailwind is if you want to go ahead and use those things, you can. You just can't use the utility classes. You just use normal CSS. Anyways, it's been a long video, and if you're still here, thanks for sticking around. I had a ton of fun doing this, and I'm thinking of making this a series. So maybe I'll do other UIs in the future. I'm also going to make this available on CodePen, so you can just go ahead and check that out. Subscribe if you haven't already done so. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Okay, thanks, bye!